I don't know about you all, but for me, it's been a wild few months. And if you've been following the astrology, it might be mirroring back some of that. But anyway, it continues. Of course, it's so wonderful. The Gemini New Moon this past Sunday feels like it's opened a kind of door, right? This was one of the initiatory lunations after Uranus's official move into Uranus for the long term, the next 7 years. And communication has been shifting, consciousness has been upgrading. I have been going through very intense physiological, psychological, relational, like just a lot going on, right? At times it feels shocking. And now this week comes the question, what are you actually willing to build your life around? Because with all of these upgrades, with all of these possibilities, how is it that we move into embodiment that is meaningful for us? No wrong answers here, of course. But I think we're being asked to consider these things because this week we see two major transition points, and that includes Chiron finally moving into Taurus after a very long time in Aries, and it will have a retrograde later this year, but yeah, that's a pretty big shift. Chiron in Aries was not necessarily an easy time. And then we also, at the end of this week, have our summer solstice. We have the sun entering Cancer. This is the zenith of the solar cycle. And at least in the northern hemisphere, that brings a certain level of fulfillment and expansion. Now, if you are in the southern hemisphere, if you are in the polar regions, if you are in the equator, or the equatorial zone, I do have an app that helps to kind of break down the Hellenistic intention, at least of astrology, as it was kind of synthesized together at that time in that period. So, of course, there's a bit of Egyptian and, of course, a bit of Mesoamerican because it was itself a synthesis. But I'm getting distracted. If you would like to see how things might be interpreted via where you are on Earth, because that's certainly the most grounding and applicable of any planetary energy, visit my app. You can download it for free. That's at dial.onescence.com. So dial.onescence.com. Check it out if you're curious. Now, I am in the northern hemisphere. I'm in Colorado, so I'm going to be experiencing summer solstice. And yeah, this is a big point of fulfillment, a big point of illumination. And I think this is how the story is kind of shifting from the possibility that we've felt certainly earlier throughout the spring and moving us towards more embodiment. Now, to give you some context, this last week, that Gemini New Moon, I think it was initiating new conversations, new perspectives, new possibilities. Of course, that was one of the first major lunations for this new Uranus in Gemini story, and I think served as a kind of activation for what we might be able to expect or what work we're being asked to do throughout the next Uranus cycle of the next 7 years. Now, this week we are moving into more inspiration, truth, healing, it's a seasonal turning point, regardless of where you are. You know, you might be experiencing the wobble at the equatorial zone. You might be experiencing an extreme right now in the polar region, or just, you know, the opposite, the winter solstice in the southern hemisphere. But regardless, there is change. That is something that is universal this week. And that's going to require some sort of action from us, right? Like, as without, so within. So, what is it that's shifting in us at this time? Now, I really think that the main theme of the week is about possibilities becoming reality. What does that look like? The question isn't any longer what could happen. No, the question is now becoming what deserves my continued investment? The reason that I am feeling this way is because of all of the aspects and transits that we have going on this week, which are starting off after a little reprieve on Monday the 15th with Venus trining Neptune Tuesday, today, June 16th. This is happening with Venus in Leo and Neptune is in Aries. So a lot of fire energy here. It is a trine though, so it is harmonious. So we will be seeing the best of this type of elemental force or energy. Fire is about inspiration, right? Fire is about the spark. Fire is about the action. Fire is about, it can sometimes be consuming. It can sometimes be destructive. So it certainly needs to be treated with respect. It needs to be applied with wisdom and inspiration. So there's a lot that goes into this kind of element and invites us to learn. But yes, because of the trine, we will probably be getting a bit more of the benefits of this type of energy. I think the theme here today is inspired vision, right? Think creativity, imagination, beauty, meaning, connection to inspiration, reconnecting to desire, even not for desire's sake, but for the experience that it may provide or the direction it may provide. Again, lean into innocence. Let things be easy. Do not force yourself. That is when the fire energy can really become more destructive and dangerous. And, you know, don't set it loose in areas where you have some uncertainty or it might be fueled by fear, right? Use it wisely. It can really also kind of help to remember what excites us. Just ask yourself, what feels alive? What genuinely inspires me? Yeah, this is about how our inspirations, how our interests, how what makes us curious is revealing possibilities. And this will kind of be informed, or maybe it's even informing. It is coming before, but at the same time, it almost feels like this is kind of asking the question, and then the next transit that's coming in tomorrow is revealing a bit more, right? Like, it wants us to figure out where we're willing to be honest about what matters to us. This is happening because Venus is opposing Pluto. Now, opposing does not mean they're getting in an argument. It means that they are opposite each other in our solar system. And so they have a direct line of sight. It's more of like a mirroring energy. It can be very illuminating with regards to themes on behalf of both of these archetypes. Altogether, the theme of this aspect tomorrow feels like, what do you truly value? And that's not always an easy question to answer. It could be bringing in themes of relationship, self-worth, desire, right? That's a tricky one. Creative courage, power dynamics. what is authentic, right? What is truth versus performance? What is transformation, and how does it happen honestly? So, as we move through into tomorrow, I think the key question is going to become something more like, what is it that I feel like I can transform through? Once we know what matters to us, healing begins, right? The contrast isn't there to scare us. The contrast is there to inform us. It invites us to take that next step. Our curiosity, yes, we hear things like curiosity killed the cat, but at the same time, we also hear things like cats have 9 lives. So we have to allow ourselves the opportunity to have the type of journey that might thrill us most. And that type of energy is in and of itself life affirming, generative, and can help us to harness the type of motivation that can really make us more likely to achieve any goal anyway. So, pretty great place to start, even if it is maybe a little bit uncomfortable to have to consider these things. Now, we will get a bit of a break in between, but then on June 19th, we're going to see Chiron entering Taurus. So the weekend begins with a bang. And the theme here is about healing the foundations. After we've been asked some of these harder questions about what matters, what we want to apply ourselves to, how we want to spin this one precious and wild life of ours, the universe is like, okay, time to heal the foundations, time to do what's necessary to make that happen for yourself. And Chiron is going to come in to help to teach us really how to bring it down to earth. I think that's what's going on in Taurus. It's inspired a lot of possibility in Aries, of course, and now Taurus gives it some ground. So this, despite the solstice coming up, or maybe perfectly placed because now the solstice is coming up, which will allow even more illumination and a big bang of possible revelation right at the beginning of this new shift in energy, right? So yeah, it's a big deal. To review, Chiron in Aries was helping us to heal around identity, possibly some themes of courage, autonomy, self-definition, and authenticity, right? And now, as it's moving into Taurus, the healing becomes more tangible. It's about value, self-worth, security, sustainability, resources, embodiment, the physical world, and our stewardship of it, right? So Aries was healing around identity and how we show up. And now Chiron is asking us to heal around what our participation in this fleeting world of forms actually amounts to. What do we dare to create while we're here? And are we being good stewards of the divine energy that's animating us? And of course, I don't think there's any wrong answer, but if there is an answer that brings more light and life and love into your experiences, it's certainly worth exploring, experimenting, right? We don't have to take everything serious to allow it to become meaningful for us. Now, the key questions here for this pretty significant shift may not come with answers right away. So allow these to marinate, allow the information to be teased out over the months and even years ahead. This is going to be about what supports us. So ask yourself, what supports me? What really supports me? What really nourishes me? What creates genuine stability in my life? And what is valuable enough to build a life around, right? These are important questions, certainly not easy ones to answer, but thank goodness we have the cosmos providing this mirror to help us kind of navigate the energies as they're bouncing around. So, again, just for some context, I feel the Gemini New Moon was a pivotal lunation that helped plant some seeds. So think back to that. What kind of intentions were you considering around that time on Sunday the 14th? Now, as Chiron is moving into Taurus, as this weekend begins, it's asking you, are you really going to cultivate those seeds? Is this really worth your time to you? Is this what you want to spend your one wild and precious life on? So it's all compounding, because healing isn't just understanding. Healing is creating the conditions where our growth can continue. Once we think we know everything, it's time to start asking new questions. Now, last but certainly not least, and again, I think bringing in some much needed illumination and clarity after such a wild spring, okay? Go back and watch the forecasts if you don't remember, because I'm just like, whoa. Okay, anyway. Summer solstice coming in on Sunday. We've got Sun moving into Cancer. This is the zenith of the year here in the Northern Hemisphere as far as the light and dark balance goes. This is the peak of illumination. This is when we begin our season of fulfillment, right? We start to reap the harvest of what we've planted throughout the spring. And so it signifies a turning point of the year. And again, if you're curious, if you're tuning in from anywhere else in the world, you can find context for your specific earthbound location on the Dial app at dial.onescence.com. Now, this turning point is global, regardless of where you are, but I am going to be speaking specifically to the Northern Hemisphere again. Now, this is the longest day of our year here, and it's peak light. So this seasonal threshold here is really representing both kind of a culmination of that planting period and also the beginning of this new summer season. From spring to summer, we're moving from growth into cultivation. We're moving from possibility towards that stewardship again, right? So this is kind of course, the universe is always unfolding in such beautiful ways, but I never get tired of seeing it as it just unfolds so elegantly. Now, as we begin Cancer season, we are going to see another shift in energy. Cancer themes tend to include matters of the home, feeling like you belong, themes around family, nourishment, emotional roots, and care and protection, right? This is the house that it represents the mother. It's ruled by the moon. It has a lot of those more feminine qualities associated with it. So this isn't protection in the sense of being a warrior or that sort of defense. This is protection in the sense of security. This is protection in the sense of proactive choice. And so again, it's really aligning with those themes where it's asking not only what matters to you, but how do you take care of what you value? And that is often a direct reflection of how we think about the forms we occupy during these lifetimes. And so if you are struggling with some of those themes, it might be really helpful to consider working on opening up to that sort of care and protection and honor of yourself as well. You can create that space for yourself. If you ever need any tools about self-compassion, meditation, divination, or more astrology information, things that I have used to help to hold that space for myself, I've created lots of content about on my website. You can find that and so much more, including my workbooks, journals. I wrote a novel and a children's book, and I'm working on more. So head on over. It's onescence.com. That's onescence.com. Okay, thank you. Now, getting back to it, Cancer season is going to be asking, what are we willing to nurture? It is mirroring the themes of this other energy that's been coming through, amplifying it with its illumination. So as this season changes, I really feel that our actions are going to want to follow. They will be most natural if we allow them to follow, if we allow some of these shifts, right? So work with the seasonal energy. And again, that could look different for you, but don't be afraid to tune in. Don't be afraid to allow the flow of what's happening to help carry you through some of these energies. Now, we also have on the solstice, the sun actually sextiling Chiron. So it is even specifically reaching out and having a sort of conversation, as Chiron has just moved into Taurus and the sun has just moved into Cancer. Now, these two signs embody the feminine principle. We have the sun in Cancer, which is a water sign, which is governed by the feminine polarity in astrological correspondence. And then we also have the feminine polarity as represented by Earth with Chiron in Taurus. So that is creating the 60-degree relationship of a sextile. Please stop chasing your sister. I'm trying to do something, okay? It's very disruptive when you do that. Excuse me. Wily kitties. Now, the sextile is supportive energy. It's providing opportunity for easy, invitational energy, right? This isn't necessarily the type of flow that we get in a trine that almost can carry you away a little bit with it in the positive sense. The sextile is still positive, but it's kind of like, hey, you want to check this out? Hey, there's opportunity over here, right? So it's a little bit of a nudge, but not so much of the flow. You get to have the opportunity to take the next step here. And this one is going to be in regard to supportive healing. And yeah, with the harmony that specifically comes through with Cancer and Taurus being very nourishing signs themselves and embodying that feminine principle of emotional nourishment, they can help us to establish or provide more physical stability for ourselves. They can help us to create or fortify our support systems. And it's about healing through consistency, healing through that dedicated devotional care where you know what you value and that's what you choose to give your energy to. Not because not everything is important, not because, we are invested in the separation, but because we recognize even within that separation, these forms have the possibility to be invested in divine ways where we can focus that energy into things we genuinely enjoy. And I think that's how we move from specifically healing into service. And those are definitely related. That's the story of Chiron. We've got the centaur who was fatally wounded in the end by his own student, and yet that wound and the lessons that it taught him, that he allowed it to create for him, the opportunities that it gave him to practice his craft, made him the legend that he is, right? And so healing through that care, healing through the environment, the opportunities, the situations, the relationships, the preferences even that we have, the curiosities that we have, even, the desires. We can get curious about the desires and what they represent. The fears, that's how we honor them. We get curious about them. We let them indicate where we would be served to bring more light and more love into our lives. And so things do not have to be perfect, but it can be very beneficial to know what types of conditions really allow us to thrive. So go ahead and ask yourself that. What is it that I feel genuinely supported by? Again, we hear that echo, right? That is what this week is about. So heck yeah. Now, even though this is reflective, and even though that feminine polarity isn't always associated with action, this is still the summer solstice. This is still asking us to take action. And we also have this first quarter moon in Libra coming through on the solstice, which is saying, take the next step. This is the action phase of the lunar cycle. The Gemini New Moon seeded. Relationship awareness became paramount. Collaboration, adjustment, decision making, and that question of authentic participation came into view. So as the week closes out and as the moon moves into this activation phase during the summer solstice, it's asking us what kind of action is going to help move this forward, whatever this is, whatever that consistency looks like for you in what it is that is calling to you, in what your curiosity is becoming piqued by, whatever your excitement may be, right? They say, follow your bliss. Now, I would love it if you would like and subscribe. I would love it if you would comment. I am new here. I'm not necessarily content creator first. I'm figuring it out as I go. But it would be really meaningful to me to be able to find a community here, to be able to share my unique way of looking at the cosmos and in the earth and our place in it, and how those things can work together harmoniously. So if you're curious, the full June forecast is on both the website on Onessence and also here on YouTube. Remember, you can download the Onessence Dial for free, and you can find all sorts of things at onessence.com, including that app at dial.onessence.com. I'd like to leave you with a bit of reflection for the week, if you haven't already got enough questions from the forecast. What supports growth over time for me? Not simply necessarily what's exciting, not simply what's familiar even, but what is genuinely nourishing for you? What strengthens your foundations? What deserves, what calls to, what enthralls you? What is it that you would love to give your continued care to? Because those questions are worth knowing in these limited forms. We only have so long to bloom as this. So I hope you will use that to help you find that kind of vibration as we come into this beautiful turning point. Even though June began with maybe some understanding we didn't know how to implement or process right away, I think this week is really beginning to bring that embodiment that'll help us to start walking the walk. The new moon in Gemini really opened those possibilities. But as Chiron enters Taurus, we're starting to be asked what of those possibilities is truly sustainable for us. And then the solstice turns the season. The first quarter moon asks us all to participate. And the next chapter is no longer about discovering what's possible. It's about building what matters. Okay. That's what I have for you this week. Let me know if you like this style. It's a little bit more freeform, and yeah, that was kind of for necessity today. But I'm happy to continue doing it if this is fun for you. So let me know. Thank you so much. Take care. and blessed be.